Stockholm, 1912. The Olympic Games were alive with excitement, bringing together athletes from around the world who carried the hopes of their nations and the weight of personal ambition. Among them was Francisco Lazaro, a dedicated Portuguese marathon runner whose talent and discipline had earned him a place among Portugal's most promising athletes. Lazaro was determined to perform at his best, but in an era when sports science and athlete safety were still in their infancy, knowledge about the human body under extreme stress was limited. In an attempt to protect himself from sunburn during the marathon, Lazaro applied a layer of wax over his body. At the time, this method was believed to be a protective measure, but what it actually did was prevent his body from sweating properly. Sweat is the human body's natural cooling system, and by blocking his pores, the wax made Lazaro vulnerable to overheating. As the race continued under the unrelenting summer sun, the consequences of this decision became tragically clear. He began to show signs of extreme fatigue and distress, yet the intensity of the competition and his personal drive pushed him forward despite the growing danger. Midway through the marathon, Lazaro collapsed. Spectators and fellow athletes were shocked as one of the competitors fell to the ground in distress. He was immediately taken to a nearby medical facility, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. Lazaro suffered severe heat stroke, a condition that occurs when the body's temperature rises uncontrollably and vital organs begin to fail. Despite the care provided, he did not recover and passed away the following day. His death marked the first recorded fatality in the history of the modern Olympic Games. The circumstances surrounding his collapse were unusual, but they highlighted a critical truth about athletics at the time. Athletes were pushing the limits of human endurance without adequate understanding of the risks. The tragedy of Francisco Lazaro was compounded by the fact that his efforts to protect himself had inadvertently caused his demise. The combination of extreme heat, physical exertion, and the blocked cooling mechanism of his body proved fatal. This event shocked the sporting community and brought immediate attention to the importance of athlete safety, hydration, and awareness of heat-related illnesses. Francisco Lazaro's story is remembered today both for its tragic outcome and its significance in the evolution of sports safety. He has become a symbol of dedication and the human desire to excel, but also a reminder of the limits of human vulnerability. His death prompted reflection on the need for proper preparation, medical knowledge, and safety measures for athletes competing in demanding events. Modern marathons now include careful monitoring of participants, access to hydration, and education on avoiding heat stroke, measures that were absent in Lazaro's time. While he never completed the race or achieved Olympic glory, his legacy endures in the lessons learned from his experience. Lazaro is commemorated as a pioneer of Portuguese athletics, a figure whose courage and tragic fate continue to resonate over a century later. His life and death remind us that the pursuit of excellence carries inherent risks, and that understanding the human body and respecting its limits is essential for the safety of all athletes. The marathon claimed him as its first Olympic victim, and through his story, generations of athletes and sports enthusiasts are reminded of the delicate balance between ambition, endurance, and human frailty. On August 26, 1960, the blazing Roman sun bore down mercilessly on the Olympic cycling course. Temperatures climbed past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the 100-kilometer team time trial into a punishing test of stamina and survival. One of the favorites for a medal was the Danish squad, a tightly drilled quartet whose strength lay in precision, pacing, and relentless discipline. But on that searing afternoon, the riders would face far more than their rivals. They would battle conditions that threatened their very lives. Among them was Knud Enemark Jensen, a determined 23-year-old who had dedicated years to reaching the sport's highest stage. Lean and wiry, he had trained through Denmark's frigid winters and raced across Europe to refine the speed and resilience demanded by Olympic competition. For Jensen, Rome represented the culmination of ambition, sacrifice, and countless miles on the saddle. The Danish team had prepared meticulously for the event, studying every rise and curve of the Roman route. The course featured stretches of open road exposed to the sun, gentle hills, and technical turns where efficiency and teamwork could decide medals. Yet the weather presented a challenge no one had fully anticipated. Few athletes in 1960 had experienced racing in such oppressive heat, and sports science offered limited guidance on hydration and electrolyte loss. Riders relied on instinct, experience, and a drive to persevere, sometimes at the expense of safety. The race began with confidence. The Danes set a strong rhythm. Jensen tucked behind his teammates in an aerodynamic line. Early on, they held pace with the best squads, their strategy unfolding exactly as rehearsed. But as the kilometers ticked by, the temperature climbed higher, and the strain of maintaining speed under the punishing sun became evident. Sweat streamed from beneath helmets, and muscles began to cramp as riders fought dehydration. Midway through the trial, Jensen's form began to falter. Observers later recalled that he looked pale and unsteady, his pedal stroke losing its fluidity. The heat was overwhelming his body's cooling systems, yet he kept pushing, unwilling to let down his country or his teammates. Support crews had little opportunity to intervene. The era's medical oversight was rudimentary, and athletes were largely left to manage their own well-being. As the race entered its final stages, Jensen's distress deepened. Then, without warning, he collapsed, tumbling from his bicycle and striking his head hard on the pavement. Teammates and officials rushed to his side, finding him unconscious in the scorching road. The severity of his condition was obvious. He was suffering not only from a catastrophic fall, but from the ravages of extreme heat stroke. Jensen was rushed by ambulance to a nearby hospital in Rome, where doctors worked urgently to stabilize him. They treated him for a fractured skull and for the effects of hyperthermia, but medical tools and knowledge of the time offered little hope for someone so gravely stricken. Despite their efforts, Knud Enemark Jensen succumbed to his injuries. His life cut short just hours after the event. His death shocked the Olympic community and sent tremors through the world of cycling. It was a stark reminder that athletic pursuit, particularly under extreme conditions, could exact an unbearable cost. Investigations into the tragedy spurred calls for better protections, stricter weather protocols, on-course medical support, and deeper research into the effects of heat on endurance athletes. Jensen's legacy endures not only as a talented young cyclist lost too soon, but also as a catalyst for reform. Safety measures introduced in subsequent decades, from shaded feeding zones and improved helmets to comprehensive medical monitoring, owe much to lessons learned from that harrowing day in Rome. His sacrifice helped shape the safeguards that allow today's riders to chase glory with far greater protection against the dangers he bravely faced. The world was just hours away from the grand opening of the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics. Fireworks were ready, cameras were set, and athletes were gearing up for the biggest event of their lives. But amid all that excitement, a single moment on a freezing track in Whistler turned the celebration into heartbreak. Nodar Kumaritashvili, a 21-year-old luger from the small nation of Georgia, was about to make his final practice run before the games began. Young, determined, and proud to represent his country, he had trained for years to earn that Olympic spot. But that February morning would mark not the start of his Olympic dream, but its tragic end. The Whistler Sliding Center was notorious even before the games began. Athletes called it the fastest and most dangerous luge track ever built. Some said it was a marvel of engineering, while others called it a death trap disguised as a sport venue. Riders were clocking speeds of nearly 150 kilometers per hour, faster than anyone had ever gone in Olympic luge history. Even seasoned veterans complained that one mistake could send them flying. Nodar, a newcomer to such high-speed tracks, had already expressed concerns to his family that it was too dangerous. Still, like any true competitor, he decided to face it head-on. He launched himself from the start gate, the sled slicing into the ice like a silver arrow. For the first few seconds, everything looked smooth. He navigated the early turns with precision, leaning into the walls, maintaining balance, adjusting his weight. But as he approached curve 16, the final and most treacherous bend, his sled lost control. Traveling at over 145 kilometers per hour, Nodar's sled hit the wall, blipped, and threw him out violently. In a split second, his body slammed into an unprotected steel support pole. The impact was fatal. It was instant. Just like that, the world lost a young athlete before the games could even begin. When news broke, silence fell over the Olympic Village. The Georgian team was devastated. The opening ceremony that night carried a heavy sadness. Flags flew at half-mast, and his teammates walked in tears. holding a black ribbon in his memory. The Olympics, known for unity and celebration, began under a cloud of grief. The footage of the crash, replayed across news outlets, sparked outrage. How could such a dangerous track be approved for competition? Why were there steel poles so close to the track? And more importantly, why were warnings ignored? In response, officials immediately launched an investigation. They lowered the start positions for the men's event to reduce speed and added higher walls and padding along the curves. While the report later called Nodar's crash a unique and unforeseeable accident, many in the sporting world did not buy it. Athletes and analysts pointed to poor track design, lack of safety barriers, and the dangerous obsession with speed over safety. The Whistler track was supposed to showcase human courage and precision. Instead, it exposed human recklessness in the pursuit of thrill. Even years later, Nodar's name is spoken with a mix of sorrow and respect. He was not a celebrity athlete or a gold medal favorite. He was simply a young man chasing a dream, like thousands before him. His death became a grim reminder that behind the glory of the Olympic flame lies real risk, real danger, and sometimes real loss. The track was modified, the safety protocols improved, and his story etched into Olympic history as a lesson learned too late. The 2010 Games eventually went on to be called the Games of Hearts and Heroes. But for Georgia, and for many who watched that tragedy unfold, one thought lingered. No medal, no record, and no spectacle is ever worth a human life. On February 12, 2010, anticipation and nerves filled the icy morning air at the Whistler Sliding Center, where the world's best lugers prepared for their last practice before the Vancouver Winter Olympics began. Carved into a British Columbia mountainside, the course had earned a reputation as the fastest, most technically demanding luge track ever built, with 17 curves and speeds topping 95 miles per hour. Its cutting-edge design thrilled athletes, but also raised alarms after several crashes during training runs. Among those readying for a final descent was 21-year-old Nodar Kumaritashvili of Georgia. Small in stature but brave in spirit, he carried the pride of his nation and the legacy of his father, a former luger. Nodar had grown up training on limited tracks with worn equipment, supported by a family who sacrificed much so he could pursue his Olympic dream. Competing on this global stage was the pinnacle of years of effort, and despite the intimidating track, he was determined to prove himself. Whistler's course, with its steep start and punishing G-forces, pushed sliding technology and athletes to the limit. Officials insisted it met international standards, yet whispers about its extreme speed persisted. Nodar, like others, had wrestled with its unforgiving turns during practice, but remained focused, working with coaches to refine each line through the labyrinth of ice. That morning, he positioned himself on his sled for what should have been another rehearsal. The opening section went smoothly. He carved through the early bends with precision, gradually accelerating. Spectators and staff watched as his sled hurtled toward the lower section, nearing 90 miles per hour. Approaching the final curve, disaster struck in an instant. A slight steering slip combined with blistering speed sent Nodar off his intended path. The sled slammed against the wall, launched upward, and hurled him clear of the track. Traveling at nearly 90 miles per hour, he collided with an exposed steel pillar beyond the safety wall, suffering catastrophic head and neck injuries. Helmets and padding offered no protection from such force. Stunned athletes, coaches, and officials stood frozen as rescue teams rushed in. Medics reached him within moments, but the trauma was too severe. He was pronounced dead shortly afterward at Whistler Healthcare Center, only hours before the game's opening ceremony, a tragedy that darkened what was meant to be a celebration of human achievement. The shocking accident reverberated far beyond the sliding community. Organizers swiftly raised the track's walls, added extra padding, and shortened the start position to slow runs for the competition. In the months that followed, Nodar's death fueled a searching debate about the balance between thrilling speed and athlete safety. Governing bodies ordered worldwide reviews of luge, skeleton, and bobsleigh courses, leading to stricter design standards and emergency protocols. For Georgia, Nodar remained a national hero, remembered for courage and determination despite scarce resources. For the wider Olympic world, his loss was a somber reminder that even in arenas built for excellence, the pursuit of records must never eclipse the duty to protect those who chase them. His final run forever changed sliding sports, leaving behind reforms that continue to safeguard athletes on ice tracks everywhere. The 1960 Rome Olympics were meant to celebrate human excellence, the pinnacle of athletic achievement, and the uniting spirit of global competition. Instead, one tragic event would mark the Games with a somber reminder of the physical limits of even the most elite athletes. Knud Enemark Jensen, a 28-year-old Danish cyclist, was competing in the 100-kilometer team time trial under conditions that were brutally unforgiving. Temperatures in Rome on that day exceeded 40 degrees, creating a heat so oppressive that it pushed the human body into extreme stress. Jensen, like all competitors, was driven by the desire to perform at his absolute best, yet the combination of intense physical exertion, relentless heat, and underlying health risks would prove fatal. Partway through the race, Jensen collapsed, unable to continue. He was rushed to a field hospital, but despite immediate medical attention, he never regained consciousness. His death was officially attributed to heat stroke, dehydration, and physical collapse, but subsequent investigations and revelations would cast a darker shadow over the tragedy, introducing the role of performance-enhancing substances in his untimely death. The controversy surrounding Jensen's death highlights the precarious intersection of ambition, competition, and human vulnerability. Evidence suggests that Jensen and other members of the Danish cycling team were administered Roniacol, a vasodilator intended to enhance blood circulation. Later reports and retrospective analyses implied the presence of stimulants such as amphetamines, although these claims remain debated. Regardless, the incident brought the dangers of pharmacological intervention in sport into sharp relief. It demonstrated that even substances intended to improve performance could have unintended and fatal consequences, particularly under extreme physical stress. Jensen's death was more than a personal tragedy. It became a stark lesson for the international sporting community on the ethical and medical responsibilities owed to athletes. The impact of this event extended far beyond the 1960 Games. In the immediate aftermath, the International Olympic Committee recognized the urgent need for oversight in competitive sports. By 1961, a dedicated medical commission was established to monitor athlete health and investigate drug use. These measures laid the foundation for the introduction of systematic drug testing at the 1968 Winter and Summer Olympics. Jensen's death catalyzed a transformation in how athletes' safety was approached, highlighting that physical preparation and talent alone were not sufficient to protect competitors. It underscored the ethical imperative of balancing the pursuit of excellence with the duty of care, ensuring that no athlete would have to risk life or health to compete at the highest level. Decades later, Jensen's story remains a somber reminder of the risks inherent in competitive sport. It exemplifies the extremes of human ambition, the vulnerability of the body under relentless stress, and the consequences of inadequate medical oversight. The tragedy serves as a historical turning point, emphasizing the importance of safety, regulation, and ethical responsibility in athletics. Jensen's death prompted systemic changes that continue to safeguard athletes, shaping modern anti-doping protocols and medical supervision in elite sport. While the memory of his collapse is painful, it carries a lasting significance. The world of sports learned a vital lesson about the limits of human endurance and the necessity of protecting those who inspire us through their dedication, skill, and courage. Knud Enemark Jensen's legacy is thus twofold. He is remembered both as a talented cyclist whose life ended tragically in pursuit of Olympic excellence, and as a symbol of the reforms that emerged from his death, reforms that protect generations of athletes from similar fates. His story is a sober reflection on the costs of ambition, the ethical responsibilities of sports authorities, and the ongoing commitment to ensuring that the pursuit of glory never comes at the ultimate price. On July 14, 1912, the midsummer sun blazed over Stockholm, turning the Swedish capital into a furnace as marathon runners assembled at the Olympic Stadium. Ahead lay 40.2 kilometers of dusty roads stretching through the countryside, a course that would test even the most seasoned endurance athletes. By midday, temperatures approached 90 degrees Fahrenheit, a punishing heat few had anticipated. The Stockholm Games were only the fifth modern Olympics, held in an era when sports medicine was rudimentary and safety protocols for endurance events barely existed. Water stations were sparse, medical support minimal, and athletes were expected to fend for themselves against the elements. Among the competitors was Francisco Lazaro, a determined 21-year-old from Lisbon, representing Portugal's first-ever Olympic marathon entry. He carried the pride of an entire nation on his lean shoulders. Portugal had little experience with elite athletics, and resources for training were scarce, yet Francisco's talent and perseverance had brought him to this world stage. He had prepared as best he could in Portugal's milder climate, but nothing in his background matched the fierce Scandinavian heat waiting for him that day. Like many athletes of the time, Francisco relied on advice now understood to be dangerously misguided. Before the race, he coated his body with a thick layer of wax and oil, hoping to prevent sweat from causing chafing or slowing him down. Instead, the coating would seal in heat, crippling his body's ability to regulate temperature, a decision that would have tragic consequences. The starting gun cracked, and the runners surged from the stadium into the countryside. Dust rose from the unpaved roads, mixing with shimmering waves of heat. Francisco paced himself cautiously at first, maintaining steady strides as he sought to conserve energy for the grueling distance ahead. Spectators lined parts of the route, cheering as the athletes pressed on, but little support awaited them beyond encouragement. There were only a handful of water stations, and medical personnel were nowhere along the course. As the race progressed, the relentless sun exacted its toll. Runners began to falter, some slowing to a walk, others dropping out altogether. Francisco, though clearly laboring, pressed on with quiet determination. He was running not only for himself, but for a country eager to make its mark on the Olympic map. By the halfway point, however, the signs of danger were unmistakable. His stride grew uneven, his face pale beneath a sheen of trapped perspiration. Witnesses later reported that his lips were cracked and his movements seemed mechanical, driven purely by willpower. Near the 19th mile, Francisco's body could no longer endure the strain. His temperature had climbed to a perilous level, later estimated at 106 degrees Fahrenheit. He staggered, then collapsed onto the sun-baked road. Passers-by rushed to assist, and he was taken to a Stockholm hospital. But treatment options for severe heat stroke in 1912 were limited and crude. Despite doctors' efforts, he never regained consciousness. In the early hours of July 15th, Francisco Lazaro died, becoming the first Olympic athlete to lose his life as a direct result of competition. News of his death reverberated throughout the Games and beyond. Officials, athletes, and spectators alike were stunned that an event intended to celebrate endurance and triumph could lead to such tragedy. For Portugal, the loss was deeply personal. Their first marathon runner, who had set out to honor his nation, had perished in pursuit of that goal. Francisco was mourned as a hero, his funeral drawing widespread attention and sympathy from the international sporting community. His passing also became a turning point for Olympic safety. Organizers recognized that endurance races required structured support, shaded rest points, frequent water supplies, and medical teams along the route. Future marathons would adopt these precautions, shaping the modern standards that safeguard athletes today. Francisco Lazaro's story endures as a sobering reminder of both courage and vulnerability. He embodied the Olympic spirit, giving everything in pursuit of a dream. Though his life ended far too soon, his sacrifice prompted reforms that have protected countless runners since that sweltering day in Stockholm. Ross Milne's story is one of those haunting Olympic tales that mixes youthful ambition with heartbreaking tragedy. In 1964, the Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria, were buzzing with excitement, snow, and international pride. Among the many athletes was 19-year-old Ross Milne, an Australian alpine skier filled with energy, determination, and a dream of conquering the snowy slopes against the best in the world. Australia was not exactly known for its snow-covered mountains or its skiing prowess, so Ross's journey to the Olympics already made him a national hero back home. What was meant to be a proud debut on the global stage turned into one of the darkest moments in the game's history. During a downhill training run, Ross lost control on one of the steepest and fastest parts of the course. Downhill skiing is no small feat. It is a high-speed ballet of bravery and balance, where racers reach terrifying speeds on narrow, icy paths lined with trees, rocks, and fences. As Ross came barreling down, reports say he collided with a tree after losing control, suffering fatal injuries. He died before he ever got the chance to officially compete. The news stunned the Olympic community. 19 years old, full of hope, and representing a country that was still finding its footing in winter sports, his loss hit hard. In the days that followed, questions started flying faster than any skier on that course. Many wondered if the downhill track was too dangerous, and if the organizers had allowed too many skiers on the slope at once. Some accounts mentioned that the slope was crowded during training, with multiple competitors going down simultaneously, which could have easily distracted or startled even the most experienced racer. Others pointed out that conditions on the course were icy and fast, possibly too much for a young skier still adjusting to European snow and pace. Whatever the exact cause, one thing was clear: something had gone wrong. Ross's death sparked a wave of soul-searching among Olympic officials. Safety in downhill skiing was not taken as seriously then as it is today. Helmets were not standard, fencing was minimal, and medical response times were slower. Many felt his accident was a tragic warning that the Olympic rush for glory sometimes overlooked the very real risks athletes faced. In fact, his death, along with that of a British luger named Kazimierz Skrzypecki, who also died during training at the same games, forced the International Olympic Committee to reevaluate safety standards. It was a turning point in how training sessions were organized and how dangerous courses were handled in future competitions. Back home in Australia, the news devastated the sports community. Ross was not just an athlete. He was a symbol of courage, a young man from a sunburnt country who dared to chase winter dreams on the world's toughest stage. His teammate, Peter Brockhoff, was so shaken by the accident that he pulled out of the same event, saying he could not bring himself to race down that slope. The entire Australian team mourned deeply, yet they also carried Ross's spirit with them. His passing was not in vain. It paved the way for a greater emphasis on safety and respect for the limits of human endurance in the pursuit of Olympic glory. Today, Ross Milne's name does not often appear in highlight reels or Olympic montages, but among those who know their sport's history, he is remembered as a young man who gave everything for his dream. His story stands as both a tribute and a warning, a reminder that behind every thrilling Olympic moment lies an undercurrent of risk, courage, and sacrifice. The Innsbruck Games went on, as they always do, but Ross Milne's absence lingered like a chill on the mountain air. His tragic fall reshaped the spirit of alpine skiing and ensured that future generations could chase their dreams a little safer than he did. This incident remains a solemn memory in Olympic history. On July 27, 1996, Atlanta's warm evening buzzed with music and laughter as thousands of Olympic visitors gathered in Centennial Olympic Park. Designed as the social heart of the Games, the 21-acre plaza hosted concerts, art displays, and meetups that welcomed spectators from around the globe. That night, the band Jack Mack and the Heart Attack kept the crowd dancing under the summer sky, their lively tunes reflecting the celebratory spirit of the Olympics. Among those enjoying the free show was Alice Hawthorne, a 44-year-old mother from Albany, Georgia. She had carefully saved to bring her 14-year-old daughter to the Games, hoping to give her a once-in-a-lifetime memory. Their day had been filled with sightseeing and Olympic events. Now they stood near the stage, faces aglow with excitement. For Alice, the trip was more than entertainment. It was a chance to share an unforgettable moment with her child. Security in the park felt casual compared with guarded stadiums. The venue was meant to be a relaxed gathering spot, a symbol of unity rather than a fortress. Yet on duty that night was security guard Richard Jewell, scanning the crowd with a practiced eye. Close to the sound tower, he spotted an unattended backpack. Inside were 3 pipe bombs packed with nails. Jewell immediately alerted authorities and began clearing spectators from the area. His swift action saved many lives, but there wasn't enough time to protect everyone. At 1:20 a.m., as music played and visitors mingled, the device exploded. The blast ripped through the crowd, hurling metal shards and debris in every direction. The joyous scene dissolved into chaos, screams, smoke, and frantic attempts to flee. Alice was struck by shrapnel, collapsing as her daughter cried out in panic. Around them, more than 100 people suffered injuries, some from flying fragments, others from the crush of the fleeing crowd. Sirens pierced the night as police and medics poured into the park, working feverishly to aid the wounded amid toppled chairs and splintered barriers. What had been a peaceful celebration became a scene of terror. Despite rapid medical attention, Alice's wounds proved fatal. She was the only person killed directly by the bombing, though the attack left deep scars, physical and emotional, on many others. Her daughter survived, but was forever changed by the traumatic loss. The Centennial Park bombing shocked the world and shattered the sense that the Games were a sanctuary from violence. Yet, even as investigators searched for the perpetrator, the Olympics continued with tightened security. Within hours, checkpoints and bag inspections were strengthened across all venues, and safety planning became an urgent priority. Alice Hawthorne's death came to symbolize the vulnerability of spectators at global events. Her story spurred sweeping reforms in how the Olympics manage public spaces, leading to the comprehensive screening procedures and visible security presence now standard at every Games. Though her life was cut short in a moment meant for joy, the lessons drawn from that tragedy helped safeguard millions of future visitors, ensuring her sacrifice left a legacy of protection. The Munich massacre of 1972 is remembered as one of the darkest moments in Olympic history, a stark reminder that even global celebrations of sport can be shattered by violence and political conflict. The 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, West Germany, were intended to symbolize peace, friendship, and international cooperation, showcasing a modern, open Germany far removed from the shadow of the 1936 Berlin Games. Athletes from around the world mingled freely in the Olympic Village, unaware that a meticulously planned attack was about to unfold. In the early hours of September 5th, members of the Palestinian terrorist group Black September infiltrated the village, targeting the Israeli Olympic team. 11 athletes and coaches were taken hostage, their lives suddenly hanging by a thread. The terrorists demanded the release of more than 200 Palestinian prisoners held in Israel, escalating the situation into a tense international crisis. News of the attack spread rapidly, transforming what had begun as a celebration of athletic achievement into a nightmare watched by millions around the world. German authorities attempted to negotiate, but confusion and missteps marked the early response, creating a tense standoff that left the hostages in extreme danger. The situation reached a tragic climax at the Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base, where German officials had organized what they believed would be a rescue operation. Unfortunately, the plan failed catastrophically. The terrorists, anticipating the assault, opened fire, resulting in the deaths of all 11 Israeli hostages along with a German police officer. 5 of the 8 terrorists were also killed in the shootout. The massacre sent shockwaves through the international community, leaving a deep scar on both Israel and the Olympic movement itself. It underscored the reality that sport and politics cannot be fully separated, and that even events designed to promote unity and peace are vulnerable to acts of extremism. In the aftermath, the massacre prompted a complete overhaul of Olympic security measures, with organizers recognizing that rigorous protection for athletes and spectators was essential. Memorials were later established to honor the lives lost, ensuring that the tragedy would not be forgotten and that the lessons learned would inform future generations. The event also accelerated international counterterrorism efforts, highlighting the global implications of political violence. Beyond the statistics and headlines, the human stories of the Munich massacre are what endure most profoundly. The 11 athletes and coaches who lost their lives had aspirations, talents, and dreams abruptly cut short, and their memory remains a powerful testament to courage and resilience. Survivors like Shaul Ladany, an Olympic racewalker who endured both the Holocaust and the Munich attack, serve as living reminders of human endurance in the face of unimaginable horrors. The massacre remains a somber chapter in Olympic history, contrasting sharply with the ideals of unity, friendship, and international cooperation that the Games were meant to embody. Today, as the Olympics continue to bring nations together, the events of September 5, 1972, serve as a solemn reminder of the fragility of life, the human cost of political extremism, and the responsibility to protect those who gather to celebrate the best of human achievement. The Munich massacre, though deeply tragic, ensures that history never forgets the 11 lives lost and the lessons learned from the darkest day in Olympic history. On February 22, 1992, crisp alpine air swept over Les Arcs, France, as Olympic spectators gathered to watch an event unlike any other. Speed skiing, featured as a demonstration sport at the Albertville Games, pushed competitors to exceed 120 miles per hour on sheer mountain slopes. That morning promised flawless conditions: clear skies, a meticulously prepared course, and snow firm enough for record-breaking runs. It would also be the last time the sport appeared on the Olympic program. Among the athletes preparing was Switzerland's Nicolas Boquete, a 27-year-old veteran of this perilous discipline. Years of training on treacherous slopes had honed his lean physique and precise technique. Within the tight-knit speed skiing community, Nicolas was admired for his composure and mastery of high-velocity dynamics. For him, the Games were a chance to validate a career spent chasing a sport that demanded as much courage as skill. He knew this Olympic appearance might be his only one, and he intended to make it count. The Lazaro course was notorious for its steep gradient and potential to shatter records. Nicolas had prepared meticulously, testing equipment, studying each section, and fine-tuning his aerodynamic suit to reduce drag. Teammates believed he was a legitimate contender for the podium in this short-lived Olympic showcase. On the morning of the finals, Nicolas joined teammates on a nearby public slope for a warm-up. The run was intended to loosen muscles and sharpen focus before their official attempts. Conditions were nearly perfect: excellent visibility, solid snow, and calm winds. Everything about the moment felt routine to an athlete who had spent years flirting with speed's edge. As Nicolas descended, he encountered a small rise in the terrain. Skiers in this discipline often glide airborne for brief seconds, and he handled the bump with practiced ease. But as he landed, a danger appeared. An active snow grooming machine maneuvering along the slope. Its lights flashed and its siren blared, but Nicolas was traveling far too fast to divert. Within an instant, he collided with the massive snowcat. The impact was catastrophic, causing injuries that claimed his life at once. The accident happened around 9:30 a.m., stunning onlookers and shaking Olympic organizers unaccustomed to such tragedy during preparations. The Swiss delegation, grief-stricken, withdrew several athletes from the finals in his memory. Yet the competition went ahead as scheduled, framed by an unmistakable pall of loss. Nicolas Boquete's death underscored the razor-thin margin between triumph and disaster in extreme sports. Speed skiing had been created to celebrate audacious athleticism, but his accident forced officials to reassess its place on the world stage. The event was dropped from all future games, ending its brief Olympic tenure. Beyond the Games, the crash inspired changes. Safety measures for high-risk winter sports grew stricter, with closer attention to course access, equipment use, and separation between athletes and machinery. Discussions about balancing spectacle with responsibility gained urgency across international federations. For those who knew Nicolas, he remained more than a cautionary tale. He was a disciplined, fearless competitor who pursued excellence on the limits of control. Though his career was cut short on the eve of its greatest moment, his legacy influenced how organizers safeguard athletes in dangerous pursuits. The mountain where he fell continues to echo his commitment to a sport that demanded everything: speed, precision, and an unflinching heart.